Ever catch yourself wondering, like, what does an economist really do all day? I mean, it's not all just graphs and equations, right?
Not at all. It's way more dynamic than people might think.
That's what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We're using this awesome guide from RoleCatcher, Career Guide, Economist, to unpack this whole world.
It's a really cool resource. They've packed it with insights,
Yeah.
like what you actually DO as an economist day to day, but also, where a career in economics can take you.
So not just for aspiring economists, but maybe even for folks already in the field who are like, what's next?
Definitely. The guide does a great job of outlining a whole career path, starting with like a junior economist role,
Okay, got to start somewhere.
right? And then it goes all the way up to, wait for it, chief economist.
Ooh, now that sounds important. But let's rewind to the beginning. The guide talks about this blend of like research, analysis, and real-world application as being what makes economics so unique. What does that actually look like in practice?
It's like being an economic detective. In a way, you're digging into data, looking for clues, trying to understand not just what is happening in the economy, but WHY.
Okay, so it's about storytelling as much as it is about number crunching.
Absolutely. You might uncover a trend hidden in a massive data set, but then you need to communicate that finding, explain it to people who aren't economists.
So it's not just about being good at math. You need those communication skills, too.
Big time. Think about it. You could be presenting your findings to a CEO, to policymakers, even to the public. You've got to make it clear, concise, jargon-free.
No pressure. The guide also breaks down these different specializations within economics. Like, we've all heard of macroeconomics and microeconomics, but then there's this whole other thing, econometrics. What is that all about?
Econometrics is where things get really interesting, at least for the data geeks out there. It's basically using statistical methods to analyze economic data.
Okay, so if macroeconomics is the big picture and microeconomics is like zooming in on individuals and businesses, where does econometrics fit into all of that?
It's the toolbox that lets you test those economic theories. Macroeconomists might develop a theory about inflation, but econometricians are the ones building the models, analyzing the data, and saying, okay, does this actually hold up in the real world?
They're like the architects of economic analysis. But let's get down to brass tacks for a second. What about the money? Is being an economist a good career, financially speaking?
Well, according to the RoleCatcher guide, economists generally earn a competitive salary. And the job market actually looks pretty good too.
Music to our ears. But like, let's say someone listening is thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I actually break into this field?
It can be competitive, but there's definitely a path. And resources like RoleCatcher can be super helpful. They've got this really cool CV and resume builder that's tailored specifically for economics jobs.
So not your average generic template.
No way. This thing uses AI to help you highlight your skills, tailor your application to specific jobs, even make sure you're using the right keywords to get noticed by those algorithms.
It's like having a secret weapon in your back pocket. But landing the interview is only half the battle, right?
You said it. And that's another area where RoleCatcher shines. They've got this giant library of interview questions, like real ones that economists have actually been asked.
So you're not caught off guard when they throw that curveball question your way. I love it. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's delve a bit deeper into those different stages of an economist's career that you mentioned earlier. We've got junior economist all the way up to the big leagues, chief economist. What are some of the key differences in terms of like what you actually DO on a daily basis?
It's a gradual progression, but there are definitely some distinct shifts in responsibility. A junior economist might spend a lot of time doing research, gathering data, maybe assisting senior economists with those complex models.
Getting those spreadsheet skills down, Pat.
Exactly. It's about building a solid foundation. As they gain experience, they start taking on more responsibility for analyzing that data, drawing conclusions, maybe even developing their own models.
So they're not just crunching numbers anymore. They're starting to really think critically about what those numbers mean.
Right. And as they move into a senior economist role, they might be leading research projects, mentoring junior economists, even advising companies or government agencies on economic strategy.
Wow, so they've gone from analyzing data to actually shaping decisions that could impact a lot of people.
Exactly. And then there's the chief economist. They're the ones setting the overall economic strategy for an organization, advising top executives, really thinking about the big picture.
So it's not just about being an economics expert. You need that business acumen, that strategic thinking, the ability to see how all the pieces fit together.
Absolutely. It's a demanding role, but also incredibly rewarding knowing that your insights can have a real impact on the world.
Speaking of impact, we've talked a lot about the positive aspects of this career path, but the guide also mentions some of the challenges. What are some of the things that aspiring economists should be prepared to face?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is simply the competitive nature of the field. Economics is a popular area of study, and the job market, especially for those top-tier roles, can be fierce.
So it's not enough to just be good at economics. You need to find a way to stand out from the crowd.
Exactly. And that means networking, building a strong professional profile, seeking out mentorships. Those things can really make a difference. And then, of course, there's the nature of the work itself.
What do you mean?
Well, it can be demanding. Long hours, tight deadlines, the pressure to stay ahead of the curve in a field that's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
You need a certain level of dedication and resilience to thrive in that kind of environment.
It's not just a job, it's a lifestyle, almost.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
But for those who are passionate about economics, who are energized by the challenge of solving complex problems, it can be an incredibly rewarding and fulfilling career path.
You're preaching to the choir here. But speaking of challenges, one thing that really struck me while reading this guide was the emphasis on continuous learning. It's not just about getting that economics degree and calling it a day, is it?
Not at all. The field of economics is constantly evolving, so you need to be a lifelong learner to stay ahead of the curve.
So what does that look like in practice? Are we talking about going back to school for another degree?
It could be. A master's or PhD in economics can definitely open doors, especially if you're interested in research or academia. But there are other ways to stay current, too.
Like what? Give us some ideas.
Online courses and workshops are becoming increasingly popular. They're a great way to develop specialized skills in things like econometrics, data analysis, or behavioral economics without having to commit to a full degree program.
So it's about being proactive, seeking out opportunities to upskill and expand your knowledge base.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the value of just staying informed about what's happening in the world of economics. Subscribe to journals, follow influential economists on social media, attend conferences. The more you immerse yourself in the field, the better.
It's about being a sponge, soaking up knowledge wherever you can find it. And with all this talk about the demands and the challenges of the field, I can't help but wonder, what are some of the questions that aspiring economists should be prepared to answer in an interview?
Oh, good one. Interviews can be nerve-wracking, but being prepared can make a world of difference.
For sure. So let's put ourselves in the interviewer's shoes for a moment. What are some of the questions that WE would ask if we were trying to identify the best and brightest economics minds out there?
Well, for starters, I'd want to understand what drew them to economics in the first place. What is it about this field that excites them, that motivates them to dive into complex data and grapple with challenging economic theories?
It's about gauging their passion, right?
Yeah.
Seeing if they have that spark.
Exactly. I'd also be interested in how they stay current with economic trends and news. What are they reading? Who are they following? Are they engaged with the broader conversation happening in the field?
Because let's be real, the field of economics is constantly changing. You can't just rely on what you learned in school 5 or 10 years ago.
Exactly. You need to be a lifelong learner, always seeking out new knowledge and perspectives. And of course, no economist interview would be complete without a question about a time they had to use economic analysis to solve a real-world problem.
So it's not just about theoretical knowledge. It's about showing that you can apply those concepts in practical situations.
Precisely. I want to hear about their thought process, their approach to problem solving, and how they were able to translate their economic insights into actionable solutions.
It's about bridging that gap between theory and practice. Now, we talked earlier about the importance of communication skills for economists. How would you assess those skills in an interview setting?
I might give them a complex economic concept and ask them to explain it to me, but not in a technical way. I might say, imagine you're explaining this to your grandmother or to a friend who knows nothing about economics. How would you make it clear and engaging?
I love that. It's about making economics relatable, even fun.
Exactly. And finally, I'd want to wrap up by getting a sense of their long-term career goals. Where do they see themselves in 5–10 years? What are they passionate about achieving? This gives me a glimpse into their ambition, their drive, and whether their goals align with the opportunities available within our organization.
It's about finding that right fit, both for the candidate and for the employer. But before we get ahead of ourselves and start planning our dream careers as economists, I think it's important to take a step back and consider some of the ethical considerations that come with this profession.
That's a really important point. Economics isn't just about numbers, it's about people. And with great economic power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. So when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive, let's explore some of those ethical dilemmas that economists might face. Things like potential conflicts of interest, the responsibility to consider the broader societal impact of their work, and the challenge of using their expertise in a way that benefits not just the bottom line, but society as a whole.
It's a side of economics that doesn't always get the attention it deserves, but it's something that we, as informed citizens, should all be thinking about.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating world of economists, where we'll delve into the ethical considerations that shape this impactful profession. Picking up from that thought about responsibility, it really hit me in that last part just how much weight hangs on the decisions economists help make.
Yeah, it's easy to focus on the technical side, the data and the models, but really, economics is about people.
Right. Their behavior, their choices, and how all of that impacts, well, everything. Which brings us to the whole ethics thing.
Definitely a big one. We have to make sure those economic decisions are made, well, responsibly, right? Thinking about the real-world consequences.
So not just, hey, the numbers say this, so do that and call it a day.
Not quite. It's more nuanced than that. You've got to think about the impact on everyone involved.
Which I'm guessing is way easier said than done, right? I mean, what's good for one group might not be so great for another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Economists talk about these trade-offs, where you're constantly weighing the costs and benefits for different groups. There's rarely a win-win for everyone.
And then throw in the whole global aspect of it all. What happens in one country can have ripple effects everywhere else.
Oh, for sure. It's a huge responsibility. Economists can't just be focused on their own backyard, so to speak.
It's like they need to be economic diplomats or something, right? Thinking about how their recommendations might play out on a global scale.
That's a great way to put it. They've got to be aware of those different cultures, political systems, all of it.
Speaking of unintended consequences, one dilemma that comes to mind is, what if those economic models are used to justify policies that actually end up hurting people?
It's a real concern. Those models, they're powerful tools, but they're only as good as the assumptions that go into them.
So if the model's flawed or, it doesn't capture the real world and all its messiness, you could end up with policies that sound good on paper, but
backfires in reality.
Exactly.
That's why economists have to be super transparent about their methods.
And be open to being wrong, too, right?
100%.
Yeah.
You've got to be willing to revise those assumptions when new evidence comes up.
Okay, so humility is key, not just assuming you've got it all figured out.
It's about being honest, too, with policymakers, with the public, explaining things in plain language, not just jargon.
Because at the end of the day, it's about serving the greater good.
Yeah.
Using this knowledge to make things better for everyone.
Absolutely. Ethical economics, it's not just about avoiding harm, it's about making a positive difference.
Now, shifting gears a bit, another ethics tangle I've always wondered about: conflicts of interest. It seems like economists could get into some sticky situations there.
Oh yeah, all the time. They're often working with businesses, governments, groups that have skin in the game.
So how do you ensure that their analysis is legit, unbiased, when there might be pressure to, skew the results?
Transparency is huge. Economists have got to be upfront about any potential conflicts right from the get-go.
So no hiding those connections, even if they seem small.
Nope. And it's not just about saying it. It's about taking steps to mitigate those conflicts, too.
What does that look like?
Sometimes it might mean saying no to a project or, having someone else double-check their work just to be sure.
So it's about protecting their own integrity, but also, the integrity of the whole field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Economics has to be about the data, the sound principles, not about playing favorite.
Makes sense. Now, before we wrap up this ethics chat, the guide also talked about the need for economists to consider the big picture societal impact of their work.
Right. It can't just be about numbers on a spreadsheet.
So give me an example. What does that look like in the real world?
Okay, so say an economist is advising a company that's restructuring. They can't just focus on, max profits. They've got to think about the employees, the community, even the environmental impact.
It's about that holistic view, seeing how it all connects.
Exactly. And advocating for policies that are sustainable, equitable, good for everyone, not just a select few.
So it's finding that sweet spot, right? where economic growth and social responsibility go hand in hand.
That's the dream. An economy that works for everyone, that's sustainable long term.
That's a powerful goal. And speaking of the future, we've covered a ton of ground here, but I'm curious, what trends are shaping economics right now? Where's it all headed?
Oh man, get ready, because it's about to get really wild. We're talking artificial intelligence, big data, behavioral economic stuff that's changing the game completely.
Okay, now you've piqued my interest. That's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
Exactly. And lucky for us, that's exactly where we're headed next.
All right, buckle up, everyone. We're talking the future of economics. Last time, we ended on this cliffhanger about AI, big data, behavioral economic stuff that's like straight out of sci-fi.
It's pretty wild stuff. And it's already happening. Like take behavioral economics, for example.
Okay, yeah, we teased that one. What's that all about again? Is it like economics for people who make bad decisions?
Kind of. Traditional economics, it assumes people are perfectly rational, right? Making choices based purely on logic, like little robots.
Which we all know is not how humans actually operate.
Exactly. Behavioral economics factors in human psychology. It recognizes that we're emotional, biased, easily influenced.
Oh, more realistic. But what does that actually mean for, like, making economic decisions?
It helps us design better policies. Instead of just telling people, save more money, behavioral economics says, let's figure out why they're not saving and nudge them in the right direction.
Oh, interesting. So it's like using psychology to hack the system almost.
In a way, yeah. And then you've got big data, which is giving us more information than ever before.
All right. But having tons of data is one thing. Making sense of it all, that's got to be the challenge, right? That's where AI comes in.
Exactly. Artificial intelligence is becoming a game changer for economists. Imagine algorithms that can analyze massive data sets, finding those hidden patterns and connections that humans might miss.
It's like having an army of superpowered interns doing the grunt work, but way faster.
Yeah. And more accurate, too.
Yeah.
This frees up economists to focus on, like, the big questions, the creative solutions, instead of just getting bogged down in the data itself.
So it's a collaboration, not a competition, like economists and AI working together.
100%. The economists who thrive in the future, they'll be the ones who can embrace these new tools, learn new skills, and adapt to this rapidly changing landscape.
So what you're saying is, if you're not comfortable with technology, economics might not be the field for you.
It's definitely becoming more and more tech-driven, that's for sure. But at the same time, those core skills we talked about, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, those are always going to be valuable.
So it's like a balancing act, right? The technical A&D, the human side of things.
Exactly. And that's what makes economics so fascinating. It's this intersection of, like, hard data and human behavior, global trends, and individual choices.
It's about understanding not just the what of the economy, but the why and the how we can make it work better for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about the wild world of economists, or at least everything we have time for today.
It's been a blast.
Same here. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into economics. We'll be back next time with a whole new topic to explore. Until then, keep those brains curious.